Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks for joining us this Thursday night. We now have just 34 days left in the Trump presidency, and the president and his enablers continue to say that he won. There was fraud and other lies that are too numerous to mention tonight. Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut, one of the most outspoken Democrats who's calling out his colleagues, particularly in the Senate, across the aisle.
They're destroying democracy. They're destroying democracy, and I'm not engaging in hyperbole here. I had tough words for my Republican colleagues on the floor last week for good reason. There are a lot of flag-waving Republican leaders out there who are undermining the faith that we all have in fair elections because their allegiance is first and foremost to Donald Trump. They are willing to do anything to keep him in power, even if it means overturning the will of the electorate.
And that is the stakes. Democracy, and we've taken it for granted, obviously, up until the last 4 years. But for those going along with what the president has been doing or attempting to do, there carries consequences. And tonight, we'll take a look at the politics of the moment, including a conversation with Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone discussing his new piece about what is next for the Democratic Party. Trump, he'll be gone, but will Joe Biden be able to wrangle the progressive wing here and work with Republicans at the same time? Also, a live report from Georgia where the Senate runoff less than 3 weeks away and control of the Senate at stake. And an ER doctor at the hospital that gave the first COVID vaccine shots in America, he'll join us. Frontline healthcare workers, the first people getting vaccinated. But what happens if many of them don't actually want to be inoculated? We'll discuss whether or not it's a big problem we could be facing. But before we get to any of that, Donald Trump, he came into the White House with the trail of lawsuits following him, and it sure looks like he will leave with the same thing happening. His companies facing state and city suits in New York over possible tax fraud, bank fraud, plus Trump facing litigation over everything from paying hush money to a porn star to cheating his own niece out of inheritance and defamation over sexual abuse allegations. And trust me, that is the very short list. Even though millions of Americans and a slew of Democrats would like to see the Biden administration Justice Department go after Trump once he leaves, Joe Biden has indicated he wants to just move on. He's taking the high road, but of course at the same time, Trump taking the low one. Trump reportedly pushing for special counsels to investigate Biden's son Hunter and also election fraud, although none, not even a little, have been proven. The Trump administration, they've gotten frequent flyer miles in state and federal courts for 4 years now. State attorneys general, they filed 138 lawsuits against the outgoing administration. And if you want a point of reference here, Obama and Bush obviously had twice as many years in office, yet they faced half as many suits against them. The states, they have been suing Trump over everything from his Muslim travel ban to separating families at the border to rolling back things like clean water rules and so much, much more. My first guest tonight, she has joined more than 100 of those suits, Maura Healey, Attorney General of Massachusetts. First of all, it's been a long 4 years for you, hasn't it?
It has. And Richard, it's great to see you again. It's been a really long 4 years for the country and certainly for state AGs who basically have had to step in and be the Department of Defense, to be there to fight unconstitutional actions by Donald Trump, to be there to protect consumers and students and workers and the environment and civil rights. And so I sure am looking forward to a new administration.
You know, I know we live in this fire hose of a news cycle where every day there's something different, but 18 of your colleagues, attorney generals from 18 states, joined 2/3 of the Republicans in the House of Representatives to basically try and disenfranchise tens of millions of Americans' votes. This is not one of these on the margin of, well, it could go. I mean, it's unbelievable. And you have attorney generals whose job it is to uphold the law and look out, obviously, for their constituents that joined in on this fiasco. Just how broken a system do we have? And I'm not just talking politics, but I'm talking about with norms and the basic rule of law.
Well, look, I think that was incredibly disappointing to me as a lawyer, as an attorney general. The fact that any attorney general would join in such a frivolous, near sanctionable lawsuit that was, as you say, Richard, about disenfranchising voters in 4 other states. I mean, it's crazy, right? And the Supreme Court got rid of it. But I mean, what it really speaks to is the fact that there are some in our government um, holding various elected offices who seem to swear a blind allegiance to Donald Trump and have done everything they can to put him ahead of country, ahead of the rule of law, and ahead of the fundamentals of democracy. And I'm sure that many of those individuals in time will come to see the error of their ways. It was very disappointing. I give credit to my Republican colleagues who did not join in that grief that is now relegated to the trash bin of history. But we do have work to do in this country because for far too long, I'm a Democratic Attorney General. I want to work with people irrespective of party. In fact, that's the way we're going to build forward, right? There are certain things that we all believe in. Free and secure and safe elections was something that I thought we all believed in as Americans, but incredibly disappointing to see the action of Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, who's got a host of problems facing him, joined by other colleagues, and then 126 members of Congress. None of them exercising their faith to the oath they swore to uphold to the Constitution and the rule of law. So I hope that changes. And again, we've got to build forward as a country and work together.
Your colleague in New York, Letitia James, she and also the Manhattan DA have separate investigations ongoing against what will be pretty soon a private citizen, Donald Trump. I talk to folks, even in this incoming administration, that are conflicted. Some say, listen, let's just put this guy in the rearview mirror, try and put this country back together again and establish some kind of norms that we can at least recognize. But others are saying, what's the precedent going to be if we just look the other way and don't hold the president to account that no person's above this law in this country? Where do you fall on that? Even though Biden doesn't want to federally go after this, should states like New York or even like your own say if there was wrongdoing, Donald Trump needs to be held to account as much as that's going to keep him in the news and also make this country go through even more investigations? What should happen?
My view, Richard, as an attorney general and as somebody who sought to enforce the law evenly, he absolutely needs to be held accountable if there was any wrongdoing. And we can debate or evaluate, as I'm sure many will, including decision makers, about what jurisdiction is best situated to pursue whatever wrongdoing is alleged or for which there is information or evidence. So that will play itself out. But I think the principle here, it's absolutely something that has to be fulfilled, is that no one in this country is above the law. For the last 4 years, Richard, we have sued Donald Trump time and time again because he operated with a belief that he was above the law. And that's just not the way it works in this country. And so it's very important that if there is wrongdoing and if there is information about illegal acts, criminal or civil, that those be pursued to the fullest extent of the law. He's no different than anyone else.
Do you believe, from what you know, and I'm not asking you to share anything of maybe an ongoing probe, but there certainly seems to be a whole lot of exposure he could be looking at, whether it be from the Trump Organization, the Trump Foundation, the inauguration, and the list goes on and on. I rattled off a few in the introduction to this. It looks like, I mean, there certainly is a buffet of things to investigate him for, and possibly even having some cooperating witnesses that have already been spoken to.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair and accurate summary, Richard. Not to mention the debt he owes. I mean, he's got hundreds of millions of dollars just in debt. So look, he's got a lot to face and to deal with. But I'll tell you, on a positive note, I feel like many of our institutions have held strong, and we came through an election that happened to be an election where more people voted than ever before in this country. It was the safest, most secure election. That's based on analysis of both Democrats and Republicans, including some within the Trump administration. And, I saw the work of poll workers and election workers do their job in the midst of a pandemic and a really difficult time for conducting an election. And so I think we have to remember the positive and the bones and what makes this country great, and just make sure that we're out there setting ourselves up for success as we go forward. And absolutely making sure that we are clear that as we sought to stop Donald Trump from trying to steal the election, we're not going to let people steal this democracy. And I think people of goodwill, irrespective of party, need to come together now and make sure we make that so.
One thing I'm not sure the public realizes is with a Department of Justice that you can either argue was either complicit or just, stood to the side when the administration did the things it did. I spoke recently to the lead counsel for the ACLU who's trying to get these families put back together that were intentionally separated. It's fallen to his group to find these families and put them together when the harm was caused by our federal government, who now acknowledges and says, not my problem. And I look at you and all the other AGs who've basically had to be the DOJ for the last 4 years. That's not normal. How much concern do you have that we're going to be able to get the public faith once again in the Department of Justice, that it's not some political arm, it's supposed to be about law and order?
Well, Bill Barr will go down in history as the most corrupt attorney general in history and the greatest enabler of Donald Trump and his efforts to undermine the rule of law and destabilize all norms of democracy. So that's Bill Barr. But I do have confidence in our Department of Justice and the good men and women who work there and who will look to return and join that department. They can very quickly demonstrate that they are on the right side of law and order and justice. And I think that the American people will come to see that. But it has absolutely been the case that state attorneys generals like myself and my Democratic colleagues have had to be there because the Department of Justice had abdicated its responsibility or somehow sought to undermine our authority to uphold the rule of law, whether it was gutting health care for millions of Americans or rolling back important environmental protections or looking to cut off access to reproductive freedom. Look at the treatment of so many consumers, workers. You mentioned the families on the border. And we've just had to be there time and time again, including most recently suing to make sure the Postal Service wasn't disrupting the vote. And just before that, remember, we had to sue to stop the Trump administration from messing around with the census. So really, I'm so glad that we can turn the page. I do think we will be able to restore the public's faith in government, but that's going to require everybody to step up and do their job. And that's certainly what I know my colleagues continue to intend to do.
Well, the storyline in the next couple of weeks, which is going to be the conga line of pardons that are going to go out to First Family and those closest to the White House. Are you clear? I've gotten different answers from different folks, on can a president self-pardon, but also a lot of people say it's not so simple as just saying, let me break out the pad and hand it out to whoever else I want. There has to be some specificity, which means that there has to be an articulation of what they're being pardoned for. Where do you think this goes? And do you think it's as cut and dry as seemingly the White House believes it is? They can give it to whoever they want for whatever they want.
Well, the White House and Donald Trump have believed any number of things that just haven't been so. And time, courts again have told them that. I'm sure we're going to see him try to do anything and everything in these coming weeks. And a lot of it will be illegal, unfathomable, never been done before. And we're just going to have to be there to make sure that he is held to the limits of the law. And you can run, but you can't hide. I mean, ultimately, with pardon, you're still subject to investigation and prosecution by state authorities if there's been wrongdoing. And certainly, I think the court of public opinion, will have a lot to say now and in the future about Trump and his enablers who worked just time after time to do things that really, unfortunately, broke a lot of people's faith here and around the world in the strength of our country and our democracy. Our country and our democracy are strong, but obviously we've got a lot of work and repair to do.
Well, General Healey, I certainly appreciate the time. I know you've had a very long 4 years, and we've all had a very long 2020. Let's hope things get back to normal sooner than later. I appreciate the time.
Hey, always good to see you, Richard. Be well and happy holidays.
All right, folks, when we come back, COVID, as the outbreak continues to break records for a number of cases and fatalities, the silver lining is, of course, those vaccines. But will enough people be willing to take the shot for this thing to work, for us to get herd immunity? Here, our doctor at the hospital gave the first vaccination in America. He'll join us after the break.